Hi, I'm Jody Smits-Anderson, and this is Subject to Change.
Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
And this is Lauren. And today we are meeting with George Ward and David Borton, related to topics, new and old, related to the Erie Canal.
Welcome, George Ward, the balladeer of the Erie Canal.
My interest in the canal is more than in the historical part, in the current thing. And that's both, I think, as a folklorist, what is the life like for the people who work on the canal? What does the canal mean when it means anything to the communities that it goes through? Some it means a great deal. Some people have no idea it's there.
Welcome, David Borton, retired RPI professor.
Before I was a year old, I was in the headwaters of the Hudson River. But let's leave that. I'd like to point out that 3 lifetimes ago, all transportation was solar powered.
Yeah.
You were either walking, using an animal, or you were sailing, and those are all solar powered. And one of my 7 solar electric boats, it's called Solar Sal,
Right.
for the mule. And that boat actually went the whole length of the Erie Canal out to the Niagara River, picked up 4 tons of cardboard, brought it all the way back to the Hudson River, took it up to Mechanicville for recycling into paper.
Discussing our vibrant canals.
The Erie Canal is really neat, especially west of Rochester. It gets, all of those towns are there because of the Erie Canal.
That's right.
You pull up to a dock and there are people on the canal riding bicycles, walking their dogs, having picnics. They really live on the canal in more ways than one.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this, but I know in Lyons, New York, and I'm assuming that there's other spots, that sometimes the municipal buildings that line the canal actually have like shower facilities, like rest stop facilities for people too, who are trapped in the canal. That's true. Like that's multiple iterations.
Oh yeah.
So there's still community support. That's so cool.
If you go to Waterford on the all the way on the eastern end of the canal, what you see nowadays is a very welcoming visitor center. And also a very welcoming community generally. There are people there who will help hapless boaters out with things like taking them to get hardware for their broken diesel or whatever it is. But 30 years ago or so, none of that was there. It was a big old greasy wall that barges used to tie up to, with some guy with a brown bag sort of half asleep against a tree and a few kids fishing, and it was not very welcoming at all.
An image of the Welcome Center at Waterford and learning from our past.
The majority of boats that go up and down the Erie Canal are big, honking, smelly diesel, rich people's yachts.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you go up and down the canal in a solar electric boat, people talk to you. You can talk as you go by. They can hear you. You can hear them. Somebody's fishing and you talk about, whether they've caught this or that or the other thing. It's really awfully nice.
I've experienced that because I was kayaking past your boat one day and just paddled along the side for a while and chatted. It was so nice to see.
Yeah, in a way, that's a throwback to the way the canal used to be, because now I have to say, as somebody who's been a cruising yachtsman and various things, that I have a certain amount of affection for diesel engines, even as I realize that they're not great for the environment or the people around them. But there used to be a rewatered section of the old Horse Canal out at Rome. It's not there anymore, but they had a boat and they had a team that hauled that boat along.
Really?
And when you got on that boat, you realize something. Every boat that has an engine, not counting solar boats, vibrates a lot, resonates a lot. It's a big resonating chamber. And you never get away from that as long as the engine is running. on an animal drawn boat, the motor was 100 yards up the towpath, and you just slid along with no sound. And an electric boat is the closest thing to that you can get.
Visit the Hudson River Maritime Museum in Kingston, New York.
Go to Kingston and get on the boat called Solaris. It's my 44-foot, first ever U.S. Coast Guard inspected, certified solar electric boat that's at the Maritime Museum in Kingston. And they're giving rides. I don't know whether they stopped this weekend or not, but they've been giving rides up until right now. And people notice what you just said. You know, they get on the boat, they can talk, they can sing, they can play instruments, they can enjoy the river, they can listen to the birds. You know, it's a totally different experience.
Yep. Yep.
You know, if we talk about the idea of the diesel engine versus the solar or the electric approach, the solar approach, it's so interesting because, you know, this used to be in the built environment as we were kind of targeting air quality of our project sites. We were always talking about ways of not having operational equipment run, not having people run their cars in waiting lines, for example. And as you guys talk about all of the very nature-oriented activities that take place on the canal, it almost seems sacrilegious at this point to have diesel engines running with people kayaking next to them, with people fishing in those waters. Like it feels downright irresponsible to have it in such close proximity. I mean, what's it doing to the water? What's it doing to the air? Everyone's choking on it, you know?
Yeah, we're in a strange transition because the move, and I haven't studied enough to understand the full impact behind the Industrial Revolution, but just in thinking storytelling wise about it, the ability to do things faster, the ability that leashing of power must have been incredible. And then a lot of things became focused on speed and power.
Oh yeah.
And we're moving now into a time when what's very interesting is people are resisting the idea that electric motors are powerful. And so they're starting to, like when the Tesla came out.
Have you ever tried to outdrag a Tesla?
Yeah, seriously. They're powerful, especially the torque at the low end, the ability to move. We have to recognize that we can achieve the power and the speed and the control and the mastery without sacrificing health and sound and cleanliness. Actually, maybe in production of those engines, we're still struggling with that.
Let me step back a bit. There are solar cars. There's a solar car race across Australia. Right. There are solar airplanes, but neither airplanes nor cars are practical because there's not enough area to provide the power. So it's just not a practical way to transport. But solar electric boats, if you have an efficient hull, efficient solar panels, efficient motor, efficient electronics, and all of that, it becomes practical transportation.
Solar electric boat.
Okay, not an electric boat. Electric boats need to be plugged in.
Okay.
You don't want to have to stop and plug in and have range anxiety. You want a solar electric boat, so you get rid of all of those things.
That's good, actually. That's really, thank you.
I feel like we need an image of a solar electric boat to like kind of flash on the screen at some point.
Okay. How do I share my screen? Okay, well, here you go. Here's one.
Oh, you got video?
Look at that.
Oh my gosh, it is. I mean, there's sound. It's very quiet.
It's the
beautiful.
water you hear.
So beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Now then, since I've got your attention. Okay, this is actually the Erie Canal. This is Lock 2 at Waterford. This is the 40-foot boat.
Nice.
Yep.
That's the one that went out to Buffalo, the whole length of the Erie Canal.
Wow.
You see at the back, it says Solar Sal.
Yep.
Yep, sure.
All right, and now then, this is on the Hudson River, Solar Sal again.
Yep.
Going down to Newburgh.
Very nice.
This is so cool.
Speedy
So
and
you
quiet.
built these, David? You built both of these?
Yes.
You said you have 7.
Well, okay. I've built 7.
How did you get to building these things?
Okay, well, I said that before I was a year old, I was in boats up in the Adirondacks, the headwaters of the Hudson. Mm-hmm. And I started repairing wood canvas canoes.
Sure.
And I made a few carbon and epoxy canoes and guide boats, if you know what a guide boat is.
Sure.
And then I taught for 30 years solar energy engineering at RPI. And all of a sudden,
your world's collided.
I can put boats and solar energy together, and I know enough physics to make it practical.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple. The first one that was really good was the 14-foot boat that you saw in the Adirondacks, the first video I showed.
Right.
And that convinced me that, look, the theory works, the sun works, everything works. It's the way to go, except all of those boats are wooden boats, and the amount of labor in a wooden boat is exorbitant, and
sure,
people just can't afford that. So I'm now in the process of trying to make fiberglass solar electric boats.
Mm-hmm.
Now
they'd be lighter as well, which is good. They'd be lighter as well, which is good.
Well,
right?
Weight's not a problem in a boat.
Okay.
I mean, I got 4 tons of cardboard back from.
That's true. All right.
The thing is that anybody can make a wooden boat. You take one piece of wood and you put it in the boat. You get a second piece of wood and put it in the boat, and you make a boat. Fiberglass boat, you have to make a plug, you have to make a mold, you have to put the fiberglass in the mold, you got to add the resin, and that's actually a sort of mass production factory type thing.
My dad did a lot of fiberglass kayak work in our basement. And I remember going to bed at night with that smell permeating our entire house. But it was, it's a really long process. It's like any mold process. It's you have to build it first he built it out of canvas and wood, and then he created a mold from that, and then he created the fiberglass boat. So he really had to build the boat 3 times.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's the hurdle that I'm trying to jump over at the moment.
So it's just learning to think about the protocol for another type of operation.
The Coast Guard worried about that for the 44-foot boat, the first ever commercial boat that they inspected.
Right.
And I was on a phone call with a whole bunch of people about this boat, the Coast Guard and a bunch of other people. And one of the guys was in charge of the electrical division of the Coast Guard in Washington. He said on the conference call, we don't have any regs for solar boats, so you're an electric boat. Fine, I said. Well, electric boats have to have 2 battery banks. I said, fine, we have 4. No, you must have 2.
Oh, geez.
The local Coast Guard people came up and said, well, turn off the sun and turn off 3 of your battery banks, run on 4 battery banks, and go up a couple hours and come back a couple hours. And I did all that. And they said, all right, now turn on another battery bank. So I did that. Turn on the rest of the battery banks. I did it. Now turn on the sun. And, everything worked. And so the Coast Guard people said, fine.
Change is a 4-letter word.
Both Lauren and I are trying to improve our building stock and improve how people think about design. And I think one of the things we butt up against all the time is if it's not familiar and doesn't fit into an established protocol, it's dismissed, as opposed to somebody saying, wow, this is something new. Let's figure it out what it's all about.
Well, I'm talking to you from a passive solar house from 1981. And why everybody doesn't do it, I just don't understand.
I plan to be doing it. That's my very next move. My house just sold, and I'm going to take several months living with my parents and develop a very small passive solar house. I think that's the best way to go. I think it just makes the most sense economically, from a sustainable environmental standpoint. Totally makes sense.
The solar electric boat is just one clear example of how boating can be better when we're working with nature's systems. And then just the idea, I mean, the one thing that I think is really compelling is that you could sing songs on that boat, George, and you could hear them.
Well, I've had a woman play the harp on the boat.
Great,
awesome.
Great. I love it.
Yeah.
I spent the whole summer on Indian Lake with no road and no electricity.
Yeah.
Basically, all of the power was human power. If you needed to carry something, you carried it. Yep. If you needed to dig a rock out of the ground, you dug a rock out of the ground. Move a stump, move a tree, whatever it was, you had just your own body. And that's how I got into physics, because if you have a lever, you can move anything.
Building community.
Jody, to go back to something you said way, way back toward the beginning about gentrification.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to see it that way. What came up when David was talking about making the trip on the canal in a boat in which you could talk to people is when you become aware of it, there are all kinds of people doing all kinds of things along the canal. Yeah. There are people who fish, there are people who just walk, and there are communities that have made a very good thing out of that. People who knew how to professionally run bicycle tours. Mm. And until this year, that annual tour the length of the canal has been drawing over 500 people.
It's on my list
every year. And so there's a lot of that kind of local use and plenty of room for more.
Renewed access to water.
The history of cities typically is building up against waterways. And unfortunately then through the late 1800s into the 1950s, the waterways became so industrialized that the towns turned away from the waterways.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Only since like the 80s that towns have been starting to reclaim. We've seen it in Albany. I grew up in Groton, Connecticut, and New London, Connecticut. Turned its back on the Thames River horribly and is now reconnecting, has been for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I've seen it in so many cities. I know that one of the things that happened in Syracuse was water quality issues, and they've addressed it actually in a very good way. They've done a lot of green infrastructure projects throughout the city where they're helping the water percolate back into the land, and they haven't had to build another wastewater treatment plant because of that kind of diversified strategy, which is really cool.
So that program's called Save the Rain, and what was going to be very sacrilege is that the area in which they were going to be installing the proposed water treatment plant was just to the outside edge of historic Armory Square, and they ended up being able to nix it. And I think that the property values, especially because of the Save the Rain program and other contributions, that area is just, it's booming. I mean, maybe not right now because of COVID, but the rest of the time it's booming. It's extremely well developed. With local companies, like local small shops, and not any big business, and it's all just a local kind of environment. So it's huge that treatment plant didn't get put in there.
Don't forget the Champlain Canal.
There is a lot of fascinating maritime archaeology in Lake Champlain. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that people there discovered was that rediscovered was that there were canal boats that were rigged as sailing boats to sail on the lake.
See, that's so cool.
And when they got down to Whitehall at the northern end of the Champlain Canal, they would dismast and they would be towed by animals the length of the Champlain Canal, and then probably raft up and be towed by steam down to New York City, mostly, rather than sailing. But the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum built a full-scale replica called the Lois McClure, which has toured pretty much the whole state. They've gone all the way west on the Erie.
A sailboat needs to have a keel in order to be able to...
Centerboard.
Yeah, centerboard.
Big centerboard case in the middle of the boat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a canal boat is a flat bottom boat.
Right.
So
right.
They're fairly contradictory, but I can.
The Sail Freight Project.
The idea was to make a sailing boat that could take freight, cheese, maple syrup, Vermont products. But there's another guy that's working with a boat called Apollonia, and that's a old steel sailboat with a diesel engine. And he would like to do sail freight type things.
Mm-hmm.
And in a canal, a sailboat is useless.
Yeah, you can't really tack.
So you either have to get the mules back to pull the sailboats or use diesel, or have solar electric boats in the canals, bring the produce to the Hudson River where it's large enough to sail.
Yeah.
So there are ways to do this intermodal transportation for the whole state.
Solar electric for all.
I've noticed that being on a bicycle, I learn much more about the places that I travel through, because there's a connection. There's also a sound connection.
Absolutely.
There's also a slightly less speed, which gives you a chance to absorb some of the things. And I've always felt the same way about kayaking, and I expect that would translate to a solar electric boat. You know the counts, right?
Yeah, I'm beginning to think about solar electric boats on a very personal level here.
It would be great to have solar electric boats in the Netherlands and in Venice, and it's time to change the world, David.
Mm-hmm.
A Song in Your Heart.
Music goes with water, just the way it is. This was a whole plot to actually get you to write a song about solar electric boats. It had nothing to do with learning about anything else.
It's been a song going through my head that was actually written by an Englishman named Johnny Handel. And it's called They're Coming Back to the Water. And he wrote it about the narrow boats in the British canals, which are people live on them. I have some retiree friends who every summer would go to England and live on their canal boat. And, there's a verse that begins, lazy old heron blinks his sleepy eye. They're coming back to the water. Flaps away on great square wings against a cloudy sky. They're coming back to the water, and so on. He goes through the whole thing. He goes all the way back to James Brindley, the engineer, the self-taught millwright, because there were no canal engineers. There were no canal engineers when the Erie Canal was built or when the English canals were started. So you've got carpenters, you've got millwrights, you've got people who were good with their hands and good with their heads, whether they were formally educated or not. And Brindley never was. And he built one of the great canal aqueducts anywhere in the world.
But he could think, he could see in 3 dimensions. He knew how water worked, and he built what he needed to build. That's fantastic. You're right about the pacing of that song. It kind of feels like kind of exhaling into the moment.
What is most important right now?
What's the most important topic to you? David, I'd like to ask you first.
Okay. I love it because there is enough solar power hitting every building to power that building. Solar power is plentiful. It can do all the kinds of stuff that we need done. And if we were just using our heads, we would use that instead of fossil fuels. The 3 things that keep all people alive are air, water, and food. The oxygen in the air comes from solar energy. Fresh water, we all need fresh water, is distilled by the sun.
Yep.
Well, our food is from the sun.
Yeah.
George, how about you?
This is true. I'm not making this up because of the topics that you're dealing with, something that has been on my mind. I was born in 1938. The population of the United States was not quite 130 million people. It is now more than twice that. And the population of the globe is closing in on 3 times what it was when I was born. how are we going to deal with that? And I look at my grandkids, and I'm not making this up. It just, I think, what are they going to experience? So,
yeah, that's a thank you for sharing that with us. That's a really big, and it can be a terrifying thought. And
yeah.
I think that the clue that David gave us about understanding that the sun is giving us what we need is part of the solution.
Yep.
And working together and building the communities,
mm-hmm.
and maybe accessing our rivers and slowing down our lives a little bit is maybe another way to start to find the solutions.
In creating a more stable climate so that we can actually grow crops.
And tell us, who's your hero?
Who is your hero right now? Who's the socially relevant person in your life? They could be famous, they don't have to be. Just who is it that you're always looking to for inspiration and going to for kind of a check-in?
My hero really is Isaac Newton, but you don't want to hear that. You want to hear something more.
No, that's perfect. I'd love to know why Isaac Newton is your hero. Go with your first instinct.
Okay. Newton's 3 laws get us to the moon, okay? Newton's 3 laws are what it takes to shoot a basket. Anybody that shoots a basket is a rocket scientist, same physics. But if you want a contemporary person, it would have to be Kamala Harris, strong, independent women. You know, that's what we need in this world, more of, and they're smarter than us men.
I'm not going to disagree.
Perfectly said.
That's awesome. Thank you, David.
Thank you. I like that. I like that. I don't know. I don't think we can get a Twitter handle for Isaac Newton, but we could certainly post some relevant links, I think. And George, same question to you. Who's your hero right now?
Well, has been for a long time because my life changed. When I was in high school, I had a friend who had gone to a particular summer camp in central Vermont, and he talked about it endlessly. In the end, it changed my life. I went off from Union to what is now called a gap year. It was the year of not knowing what the hell you want to do. And then I went all the way through law school. Camp director and his wife were people whose focus was entirely not on color war, not on any of those things, but on helping individual kids to have some sense of achievement with whatever they wanted to do in their lives. Essentially made me change my life. I went off and became a teacher and became a folklorist, went back to graduate school, again, trying to figure out what people do with their lives on a day-to-day basis, and eventually became a folk singer and am damned happy and proud with it. That man was John Seeger, Pete's next oldest brother.
Wow.
He's a Quaker.
Nice.
So, John.
Excellent. That's great. You hear Pete's name all the time, but to hear John Seeger, that's wonderful, a wonderful homage.
Yeah, well, Pete was a huge influence too, of course, but if I had to pick one that actually changed my life, it would be John.
This has been Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
I love the fact that you're looking forward and back at the same time. I think that's what, to me, sustainability is about. It's just a big cycle that we can all learn from. And I love the fact that you're willing to take this little adventure and talk with us when you had no idea what it was going to be like.
End credits. Thank you to David Borton and George Ward. Interviewers are Jody Smits-Anderson and Lauren Stanek.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.
It was fun. Thank you.
And I'm running off to order some solar cells right now. I'm going to play.
Oh, perfect.
Let me know when
I'm not kidding.
Order a whole solar electric boat.
That'll come next.